Hey everyone, I'm David Schloss, editor of Digital Photo Pro and Digital Photo magazines. Today you can see I've got my headphones on. That's because I'm going to be talking via the interwebs to David Grover from PhaseOne. David Grover is going to be walking us through the new Capture One Pro 10 and all the new features in that. And for those of you not familiar already with Capture One Pro and the differences between things like Lightroom, or if you're still hanging on to Aperture, we're going to walk through some of the key features in Capture One Pro 10 as well. So David is the guy who knows everything about Capture One Pro. He does the webinars for Capture One Pro. He does presentations. He does trade shows for them. We're lucky enough to have him on the line right now from all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. Thanks for being with us, David. And I'm not really sure I know your full title.
The official title is Business Support and Development Manager, whatever that means.
Well, it's great to be talking to you, David. Thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through this. Today we're going to talk about Capture One Pro. You guys just had a milestone release. You're at version 10 now.
Correct.
A bunch of new features in version 10 that we're going to talk about, but let's start back for people who don't know what Capture One Pro is.
Sure. Capture One is, you can see it on the screen now, of course. Capture One's primary, job or mission in life is to be the best RAW converter that you can get. So, taking the raw files from your camera and then creating your final output with a variety of adjustment tools. Additional to that, it's also an asset manager. So if you're used to using Aperture or Lightroom and so on and so forth, then it's equally as home as an asset manager as it is a raw converter as well. And I guess thirdly, which is one of the main strengths of Capture One, is also its ability to connect to camera. So Canon, Nikon, Sony, and PhaseOne hardware, of course, and then shoot tethered directly into the application as well.
Yep. So let's talk a bit also about the non-modality of the interface. Can you explain what that means and why that might be important to somebody who's using something like Lightroom?
Yeah, there is no modes in Capture One, and as far as the interface goes, it's very straightforward in the fact that we have tools over sort of on the left-hand side of your screen. We have the viewer in the middle and the thumbnails to the right. And of course, we can hide and show all those elements as we wish. But as you said, there is no mode. So there's no library mode or develop mode. At any point, I can, choose an image and start it processing. So if I just use a keyboard shortcut, I can start that processing. And indeed, it did in the background. If you just see like so that just processed out in the background, so I didn't have to switch modes to do any of that. The various tool tabs you see here on the left hand side contain all the various different tools that you might want to use in Capture One, and of course all of this is customizable as well, so you can really create the interface that makes sense for you. Insofar as the fact that if you don't like the tools on the left, we can place those on the right hand side. If you don't like the browser, on the side, we can also sort of shift that down to the bottom as well. So that interface, really, you can kind of manipulate and change around to however you like, because we're all different. We might you might use a tool, David, that I don't. If you never shoot tethered, then of course it makes sense to totally remove an entire tool tab. If you never shoot tethered, then it doesn't make sense having it there. So all of that is very flexible, and of course we can also save our workspace and always return to some kind of default if we've messed everything up. So and you can also have workspaces for different tasks as well. So a workspace for shooting tethered, a workspace for editing, workspace for rating, and so on.
And one of the things I've been noticing in reviewing both 9 and 10 is the edit keyboard, so you can really customize your workflow. Can you just hop to that for a second so people see what exactly you can customize?
So under here we have edit keyboard shortcuts. So we have various different, the default shortcut, I guess. You'll also see something here called Logic, because that's we're developing in partnership with Logic Keyboard, one of those shortcut keyboards with shortcuts printed on the keys themselves. So if you don't want to sort of spend time making your own keyboard shortcuts, you can just use the default set and also have a keyboard that complements that. Or you can go into really any of the many shortcut commands that Capture One has and just create your own shortcut as well. So that could be shortcuts that are familiar to you from other applications like Photoshop, or you can just, develop your entire own shortcut set as well.
Right. So, which I have. I've been playing around, and I have keyboard shortcuts to make new layers. I have keyboard shortcuts to switch to the brush and erasure tool. It's really pretty neat.
Yeah, the only issue is that is running out of space on a keyboard, I think. So.
Right. Okay, so let's get started talking about the new features in Capture One Pro. And one of the things that I think Lightroom and Aperture users will want to see, even though it's not new, is how powerful the local adjustments are.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, with local adjustments, if you're used to working with, let's just open up an image, that would make sense. Hang on, I'm just looking. Let's just grab our chilies here. If you're used to working with layers in Photoshop, it's very similar. And you have the local adjustments tool tab, the little paintbrush here, which loads all the tools which are compatible with local adjustments. And very similar to Photoshop in the fact that you can add layers. So if I make myself a new layer, let's just call that chilies and name them, of course, so you don't forget what each layer is doing. And then with various different brush drawing tools, then that allows you to make local adjustments just to target adjustments on one particular area. So up to 16 layers. And then all those tools you see on the left-hand side, even including things like the curve tool, local sharpening, local noise reduction. It's very powerful way to do a lot more in a raw converter, where previously you would have to go out to Photoshop to do things like that.
Right, there's a lot less round tripping to Photoshop. So if you wanted to take, for example, that pepper shaker or pepper mill out of the top there, you would probably want to go and do, that in Photoshop. But if you wanted to maybe pick up a couple of those salt flakes, you can do with the healing tools, the spot tools here in Capture One Pro.
Yeah, exactly. So if we wanted to get rid of, anything, we could make a new repair layer, as it's called, and then get a suitable size brush, and then pick a source, like an option click like we would in Photoshop, and then we can just take those various elements away, except I need to get full opacity. That would help. And then we can remove little artifacts like that. But yeah, of course, big retouching jobs, you want to go out to Photoshop, but small, simple things like that is easily achieved in Capture One.
Which is excellent. So let's take a look now at the new features, the people who are bored with the last 3 minutes of us showing them stuff they already know. Let's take a look at the new features in Capture One Pro 10.
Yeah, well, I guess the first sort of hidden feature, I suppose we could say, is we have generally when we have a new release, we have a new processing engine. So that's the brains behind Capture One that we're famous for, the good raw quality conversion, good noise reduction, natural colors, all those kinds of things. In this release, that conversion engine or the new part of that is all been about performance. So when I say performance, that's things like, say, zooming into 100%. So this is a 80 megapixel file. So the time to render is impressively fast, as that's 80 megapixels. Panning around is nice and smooth, and I have an almost instantaneous update to 100%. I mean, on our recording, I think this is running sort of 8 to 10 frames a second, but the viewer frames per second is super smooth and much faster than that. We've also done some clever things with pre-caching. So if you're browsing through images like this, as soon as I snap to the next image, then almost instantly it's at 100%. And if I use my cursor keys to sort of go back to the previous image, helps if I have a spot that's in focus. So you see that's like rendered to 100% straight away, and that's 100 megapixel. If I go to my next shot, you see that's also fully rendered, no time. And then the next shot, you see that's also fully rendered, because we're always optimizing in the background to try and pre-process the next image, as you can see, like so. So it becomes really speedy to just basically move around the application and work faster.
So is it doing just the next image, or is it does the next image and
So
then when that's
next
done it keeps
next and
going?
previous basically. So as soon as
Mm,
I've advanced to this one, we're already thinking about the next one, and we've already stored what was going on in the previous one. So
right,
there's really
right,
no sort of delay as such. And I think the important thing to point out is you don't need a supercomputer to achieve that. I'm on a 2.5-year-old MacBook Pro. So I'm not running a maxed out Mac Pro or anything like that. And this is an 80 megapixel shot. That's a 100 megapixel shot, and I can, nip back and forth very quickly without any sort of delay at all. And that will only
right,
improve if you have even better hardware than I have, for example.
right, right.
So that's kind of the change of our processing engine, all about performance. So you'll see gains everywhere, basically in processing time and tethered capture. You'll see the most gains in the examples I've just shown you. So all about performance, and that's kind of an invisible feature. It's just all the code under the hood has been optimized just to work better. So it's not that kind of tangible thing that you can see, but in terms of R&D time spent, it's actually a big bulk of the work to improve all of that.
And I think you did a big update with the raw converter in 9, right? It got a lot better than the raw converter in
Absolutely.
8.
Yeah, there
Right.
was a big jump from 8 to 9. So really, um, we have much less to do with kind of raw conversion quality, and I think 8 to 9 was that the concentration there was image quality, and so on, and then the concentration for 10 was to optimize that performance because we've already got the image quality, and then add a few more things into the mix as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So what else is hiding in the new version?
So what else is hiding? With regards to the workspace, I mean, users who've never seen or used Capture One before, this won't look any different, but we've kind of rearranged the workspace a bit. And one of those things that we've done is put our lens tool tab kind of early on in this left to right process, because we have totally revised the way sharpening works in Capture One as well. So we have 3-stage sharpening, which might sound excessive, but you can choose to use none of those or some of those or all of them. So it's up to you. The first one is the one you see here, which is diffraction correction. So that corrects for I guess an optical error. When you start to close the aperture down on your lenses, you reach the less than optimal aperture and it starts to soften the image. So based on the lens metadata, we can then use a different sharpening technique, deconvolution sharpening, to correct for that process. Let me see if I've got a sample, because I did have something here, here we go. So we've got, let me just hide the browser. We've got the same image. You can see this one is f14. This one is f5.6. The camera in question, I think, is a PhaseOne IQ3-100, but this works with any camera. It's not a PhaseOne specific adjustment. So if we zoom into 100% for both of those, let me just click that, and let's go to our craggy rocks here as such. Now, depending on our across the waves broadcasting, it might not be something that's immediately visible, but of course you can try on your own images. So on the left we've got f5.6, on the right at f14 it's starting to soften, but if we just tick this box on, based on the metadata of the lens and a few other parameters and the aperture and so on, we can do specific sharpening to bring that level of sharpness up pretty much close to how it was shot with the wider aperture.
No, that's definitely visible on the webinar. And I think an interesting thing is that most photographers stop down when they're shooting landscapes because they
Yes,
want, they want more sharpness from foreground to background
absolutely.
without realizing that they're losing that critical, sharpness point of the lens.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is just an easy tick box that you can turn on off if you want to have that. The reason why it's not on permanently, because on smaller apertures we probably really wouldn't see any difference. And it does
Right.
increase the processing time. So again, it's a choice you can make. Like, did I shoot at a small aperture? Then yes, I did. So I think I'll turn that on to improve it.
And I think that the lens correction tools is probably one of the more powerful things about Capture One Pro. So have you done specific webinars just about what each of the tools in the lens corrections are?
Not for a while, so that's probably something I'll do again soon. I did one recently that was just about the sharpening, so that kind of dealt a lot with lens correction. But it really is quite a powerful tool, as you say. So you're right, that's probably a good subject for the future as well.
And for what if people who don't know what I'm talking about, you guys have got dozens of webinars going
Yes.
back, multiple versions up on YouTube, and
Yes.
you can find them from the PhaseOne site, and they're really pretty deep resources.
Yeah, and it's something that, as you said, we've been doing for a number of years now, and we've really found it helps people. It's different to kind of a pre-scripted, planned tutorial. It's a bit more kind of relaxed and a bit more dynamic, and we take questions from the viewers. So it's worked out really well, actually. So okay, so that's the diffraction correction. If we just go, let's just go back to these guys because they're nice and sharp, and this gives us a good indication of what's going on. So as well as the diffraction correction for this shot, f11, I think it has a tiny benefit if I turn that on. So I probably would in this case. And then stage 2, as we spoke about having 3-stage sharpening, was that we added a new slider in the sharpening tool called halo suppression. So one of those things, if I just aggressively sharpen this to really sort of hammer the point home, when you kind of aggressively sharpen something, you start to see just where I'm tracing with the mouse sort of along the edges, those sort of halos, I guess, hence the name, halo suppression.
Hmm.
So the black lines and the white lines, and what halo suppression does is just help to kill those halos down, but still maintain the sharpness of the image. So that's just a new additional slider which allows you just to push that a bit further, basically. So this does a really nice job of letting you do that aggressive sharpening, but killing the sort of unpleasant side effect of it as well. So that's stage 2. And then the final stage is if we go to process recipe. And for those Lightroom people out there who wouldn't have seen this, Capture One allows you to run sort of multiple process threads or recipes at the same time. So if I wanted to have 16-bit TIFF and a JPEG and let's say just a PNG at the same time, I could do so. So that avoids me having to go into a process dialog. And once I have these recipes turned on, like we spoke about earlier with the non-modal support, I can target any image and press a keyboard shortcut, and then we start processing straight away.
Right.
So that was a slight divergent, but just to illustrate what this is. Yeah, the final part of this 3-stage sharpening is that previously in Capture One, let's say we've got our image here, we've applied our sharpening and we're happy with it, but we need to resize it either for the client or for our website or something like that. As soon as you resize an image, there is quite often a negative effect to the sharpening you have applied. And previously in Capture One and of course other applications, there was no real way of knowing exactly what that negative effect would be. So you would either have to experiment with settings, make outputs, and then see what it looked like as a final image, or hope for the best. So we added something called Proof View, which is this spectacle icon in the top right hand corner. So what Proof View will do is give you a highly accurate simulation. I mean, simulation's not the right word really, but a highly accurate view of how the output's going to look. So in this process recipe, I want to scale it down to 3000 pixels. We can see here. I'm going to convert to sRGB, and it's also going to be a JPEG. So as soon as I hit that proof button, then what happens is we're proofing now down to 3000 pixels across on my screen. You can see the proofing icon at the top. We're simulating how it looks in sRGB, and we can also see the JPEG artifacts. So if I say drop JPEG quality down to 0, I can start to see when I lose detail, and I also get an idea of the size of my file as well. So this allows me to get a good balance between quality output and also file size as well.
And with the proofing on, can you continue to use Capture One's adjustment tools and see
Yeah,
how that's going to look?
exactly. So if I think, well, proofing down to this size, it's probably a bit aggressive, so I could adjust it here, or equally in the process recipe itself, under adjustments, we can also add additional sharpening or completely disable it. So with no output sharpening, you can see the image change there. So basically, we're only using the sharpening that I have applied in the sharpening tool here. And you can see by reducing the size of the image that we have a sort of slightly negative effect. It doesn't look as sharp as it could. So let's say this was going to screen output. So I could say, well, let's add some additional output sharpening for screen. And then I could play with the sliders here and proof exactly how it's going to look at my JPEG output as well. So now I can just decide exactly what I want to have. And this is totally how it will look once I make that export and bring it into, Photoshop or whatever other image editor I'm using.
That's great. And also this is a great panel for Lightroom users because you've got tokens here for doing your output,
Yes,
which is variables. And I want to talk a second about tokens because this is incredibly powerful organizational tool on the output side.
definitely. So in the output location, obviously I can specify a destination at the top level. So I've just, before we started chatting, I just made a quick folder here called exports. And then the subfolder, if I just delete that token, the subfolder is then really up for anything. We can either create a manual subfolder just by typing in here, and that will make a folder called manual in this case, or we can browse a whole bunch of different tokens, as you correctly refer to them, David. And these are all kind of tokens that extract some kind of metadata from the image or something like today's date, for example, and then uses that metadata to create either single folders or indeed entire folder structure. So we could have, as the one I had up there, which was current date, so that would filter images into the current date, or it could be the image date, for example, or it could be something like, if we just filter these down into something general, let's have, basic metadata is what I'm looking for. So even something like star rating. So if you can imagine you're exporting 1,000 images with all various different star rating, then Capture One could sort them into their individual folders of 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, or color tags, for example, could sort them into their red, green, blue, purple, pink color tags and so on. So it's an enormous time saver because it simply means that you don't have to sit there and create folders yourself. You just let Capture One do that for you.
One of the things I've seen retouchers do is, they can work on multiple jobs in one sitting for multiple different clients and then
Absolutely.
use the metadata of the file to make the folder. So if something is from client A and you put that in the headline or the description and something's from client B,
Yep.
you can actually just make your folders and your naming based on it and not pay attention at all in your work to who the client is or not
Exactly.
have to make separate, yeah.
Yeah, we can use a folder called collection name. So if we have images stored in different folders, let's just okay that. And then we went to, a view that was like this, and I selected all of these images, that's 144, and then processed them. On the output side, they would simply be sorted into folders based on their collection name. So
Right.
it's hugely powerful in that respect. And the sky's the limit really in terms of what you can do. And of course, if we were doing something like multiple recipes. Let's say we had this recipe on and a quick proof, which is like a super fast output. Then we can combine tokens. So I could say something like, well, sort them by their recipe name. I can type ahead if I know the name of the recipe. Then if I put a / in, it'll go down to the next level, and then I could say sort them by their rating or something like that. So you can see we get a suggestion here. It's going to make a folder called JPEG Quick Proof /0 because it's just giving me a sample, and that would be 1, 2, 3, or 5. So
Wow.
it's extremely powerful. Yeah.
That's something I've never seen in one of your webinars.
Ah, there we go.
So what else are we looking at in Capture One Pro 10,
Okay,
or what have I missed?
just to finish the sharpening story, as well as the output sharpening for screen, we have output sharpening for print, where we can apply viewing distance, and really good for retouches. We can simply say disable everything, because if you're outputting for retouch, then sharpening is maybe something that you want to do at a later time. So we can simply disable everything and also ignore the crop, which is quite handy as well. And the last thing, if I just turn off proofing, it's kind of a restriction that was lifted with the new processing engine as well. So if you remember, we did a quick mask there just on the chilies itself. So with something like local sharpening, in Capture One 9, if I had certain values of threshold and radius here, they were locked on the other layers, but now I can mix and match my sharpening values on every single layer. So you can do pretty complex sharpening. Like in this case, if we were going to sharpen this for real, the background, I would probably just turn the sharpening off because most of the shot, it's shallow depth of field, and then really we could target our sharpening just on the masked area like so. And this way we're not sharpening out of focus areas because there's no detail there. We can purely concentrate our sharpening. If we just turn that off, exactly on the subject at hand, and have different radiuses and threshold going up that layer stack. So that's a bit nerdy, but it's kind of very useful for a lot of applications. Something that is quite exciting, but I guess more niche, is integration with these hardware panels, which is something we've actually been working on for a while. So these are the sort of hardware panels that are traditionally used for video grading software and so on and so forth. And for some time we thought, well, it makes sense. Why shouldn't we be using these for still image as well? Certainly it's not for everyone. If you're only working on a few images, it kind of doesn't make sense. But if you have heavy workload, then these various different panels can access all the functionality in Capture One without really having to have any of the tools on screen. So you can work full screen, you can push multiple tools at the same time. They're just connected by USB, very simple, and you can create your own custom maps, like a custom workspace or custom shortcuts, to plug directly into these systems. Very high end, beautifully made. Of course, comes at a price, but again, if you have heavy workload, time is money, and that's important.
And we're going to be reviewing those. We have the tangent panels coming to us from the company, so we'll be doing video reviews. They also wanted me to point out that their other panels will also work with the system, so that there's the really finite control in the element, and then they have slightly less expensive products, and they will also work with
absolutely us. So like the ripple here, which is just for the color balance tool, which is one of the strengths in Capture One. So three trackables. This is much lower price point than the element stuff. They also have the wave, which is an all-in-one kit, and then they have a virtual one on the iPad, which you can try out for free on like a daily trial. And again, that behaves just like its hardware counterparts, but without the sort of tactile interface. But it's a good introduction on exactly how the system works.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely worth having a play with that for a review for sure. It's great fun to use. Takes you about an hour to kind of get into the swing of it, and then yeah, you're away for sure.
That's great.
Camera focus, just the next new thing springing to mind. It's a small thing, but really good for still life guys. So if you just need to nudge the focus slightly, if you've been doing a shot like this and you just want to pull back the focus a bit or shunt it forward, then we have controls here ranging from like a coarse adjustment to the outside to a fine adjustment on the inside. So when your camera's tethered, Canon, Nikon, Sony, you can just tap those to jog the focus.
That's great. And does that work with every camera that you guys tether to, or the specific models that you can do the camera
No,
focus?
it works with any Sony PhaseOne, Nikon, or Canon. Sony and PhaseOne, you don't have to enter live view mode, which is this video camera icon here, because if you have a connected camera, you can also get a live view of the subject too, which is super useful for composition and lighting. So Sony and PhaseOne, you don't have to be in live view. Canon and Nikon, just due to the way the firmware works in those cameras, it won't let you adjust the lens unless you're in live view. But it's a pretty quick matter just to tap that.
Yeah.
Live view pops up, click, click, and then close your live view down again. So it's really not a big challenge for Sony or Canon users.
And you say that, tethering is one of the strengths of Capture One Pro, but it's really the only tool that lets you go from tether to edit in the same package from multiple vendors.
Absolutely. And with speed as well, and with full camera control, you can see the camera panel here lights up with all the functionality of your camera. There's a camera settings tool here, which fills up with various other settings you can change. As I said, live view, capture. We've also got an overlay tool, which allows you to drag and drop any image on there, which is very helpful for fitting an image to like a magazine cover, or if you're doing compositional work with multiple images, you can use those images to help build your composition and so on. So there's lots of tools in there that enable your tethered capture to be very fast and very slick. And time from triggering the camera to getting the image on screen is pretty much instantaneous. With Canon, Nikon, it's stupidly fast and PhaseOne because it's all USB 3. But even with Sony on USB 2, it's still pretty rapid. So if you're shooting tethered, people, product, architecture, it's a revelation to shoot tethered quickly compared to anything else. So with the tether capture up, we've made that addition there. We've also done just a couple of tweaks with asset management. So for example, if you want to merge folders in your catalog, you can just drag and drop them on top of each other and do some renaming. So there was just a couple of little cleaned up features in there for asset management. And if you are on Lightroom or Aperture, you can import your Aperture library or your Lightroom catalog if you wish as well. Just a kind of a good way to compare what your images look like in Lightroom or Aperture compared to Capture One, because no two RAW converters are the same, so this is a good way to test it out.
And before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the color features. You talked about the tools that let you do color balance. Can you just give people a little idea of the power of the color editor in Capture One Pro?
Yeah, so we have two main color tools. We have the color balance tool, which is like a creative tool, if you like, and then we have the color editor tool, which is designed to edit color, hence the name color editor, I guess. But they work a little bit differently to probably what you would be used to in Lightroom. If we start with the color balance tool, that's a really sort of simple concept to get your head around. We have three color wheels: shadow, midtones, highlights. You have a spot in the center, and wherever you drag that spot will tint that area to that particular color. So in this case, we don't actually have much shadows in that image. So let's grab something a bit more shadowy, perhaps. Let's grab Alex down here. Let's just reset that. So if we probably look around the deepest shadows in her hair, if I drag that out to the side, you see that gives us a nice cooling effect as such. The further I drag it out to the edge, the greater that effect is, or I can pull the slider on the right hand side. So we have control over shadows, midtones, and highlights, and we can place a color grade on an image really quickly and easily. In the past or in other applications, you would kind of be restricted to using levels or curves with individual color channels, but you have to know a little bit about mixing colors then to know, okay, if I want, purple highlights, how do I achieve that? Whereas this, you'd say, well, I want cold shadows. I just move the point over here, and I want them very cold or just a little bit cold. So anybody can use this tool for color grading. So it's a fun tool to play with, certainly. And you can create your own look. You can create your own style. Of course, we've added some ones you can play around with here, which we can just scroll through and see what the various different grades do. But it's a really fun tool to play with.
So with this tool, you can stack things, I noticed, and so you can do a preset and then stack one of the presets on top, and you can do that in metadata too, so that you could, there's a lot of places in Capture One where you don't have to go through and make the final thing you want. You can make the little pieces of what you want and then apply them over top of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we wanted to have, this preset here, we could always sort of stack that on top of another one, or we could combine that with a color edit or a white balance tint or anything really. So you can think of all those different adjustments as different building blocks to get to your final shot for sure. And the color editor, which is a wonderful tool, and actually, sorry to go back to this image, but it's a good example of what it does. And the difference really here is that, yes, we have a basic color editor where you have the kind of main colors which you can adjust, but the advanced color editor gives you much more control and precision, which is really what Capture One is all about. And the way it's designed is that you first create or set the color range that you want to edit, and then you adjust that color range. So if we wanted to adjust our chilies, I just take the picker, click on the chilies like so. To aid selection, we can make this bigger. And unless you're very good at visualizing color, we don't really know what this kind of range is going to affect. And then say view select color range, and now you can see anything that is not going to be affected gets turned to black and white. So now I have a really accurate view of exactly what I'm going to adjust. And you saw if my range kind of sneaks out here, you can very easily adjust exactly what we're going to get. So it gives you the ability to first set a very accurate range, and then once it's set, it also then gives you that ability to just tweak that color to exactly how you want to have it. And we can have 30 different picks. So we're not limited to just one pick. We have 30 of those, which we can manipulate in any way that we choose.
And you can create a layer mask from this selection, right?
Absolutely. So up in the subcontext or the sub tool part here, we can say create mask layer from selection, and that will use that color range. Just takes a couple of seconds because it's not like a binary mask. Depending on the color range, it's going to vary in its opacity as well. So now we see we've got layer one up here. If I press M on my keyboard, just to toggle that on and off, you can see exactly the range that it's created. And that gives us the ability then to use any of the other tools on that color selection. Because in the color editor, we have hue, saturation, lightness, but of course, converting that selection to a mask means we then get sharpening, white balance, exposure, etc., all the other tools that we can use for a local adjustment.
So if people want to find out more about Capture One Pro or try out a demo, where should they head?
Just probably the easiest thing to do is just go to captureone.com. That's pretty easy to remember, and that will take you to the right part of the website. You can download a free trial for 30 days, so that's fully featured. And you can try everything out in Capture One that you can. And then once your trial is over, you can then choose to go for one of the Capture One products. So we have Capture One Pro, which covers all cameras. And then we also have a free version, Capture One Express for Sony, which is just for Sony cameras. And then we have Capture One Pro for Sony, which is the same as Capture One Pro with more features, because the Express version doesn't have things like local adjustments or tethered capture. So the Express version is free with a smaller feature set. Pro for Sony, full feature set, but only Sony cameras. Yeah.
So David Grover is the Capture One Pro czar. because I still don't remember what your title is, so we'll go with
I'm
that
going to
now.
change it to that, I think. Yeah.
David, I really appreciate you taking the time today to walk us through this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime. And yeah, head to capture1.com for more stuff.
So again, if you want more information on Capture One Pro, you can go to capture1.com. If you want some more information on the cameras that PhaseOne makes, you can go to phaseone.com. If you want more videos from us, you can check them out right here on our YouTube channel or visit us at digitalphotopro.com. Thanks so much for watching.